Social innovator.
No, I read. I was very impressed with what you did.
Good morning. My name is Rebecca Blumenstein. I'm a Deputy Managing Editor of the New York Times, and I'm very pleased to be here today to introduce this session and our esteemed panelists about where the jobs of tomorrow will come from. The current turmoil in the global economy is driven by what we're seeing as a triple disruption: automation and technologies, which really have accelerated during the pandemic itself, which destroyed so many jobs and created others, and also the massive green transition that's taking place. These disruptions are causing permanent changes in the labor forces around the world. And today we're going to talk about what kind of investments could lead to the jobs of tomorrow that would increase GDP, obviously help workers around the world make the transition, and have other positive impacts on society, such as reducing inequality. And I'm very honored to have four leaders here today who are really on the front lines of the future of work. The first is Minister Mikael Damberg, Minister of Finance of Sweden. And second is Deepu Moni, the Minister of Education in Bangladesh. And then Francois Philippe Champagne, the Minister of Innovation, Science and Industry of Canada. Wow. And finally, Joost de Blok, who's the founder of Buurtzorg, which is a neighborhood nursing organization in the Netherlands. And I wanted to basically start off asking where your work fits into this premise. And first, Minister Champagne, if we could start with you. You're doing a lot about Canada's transition and the transition from humans and machines and automation, and really trying to focus on how the government can help the private sector and its workers make a huge transition to a new digital green economy. Could you talk about what the biggest challenges are?
First of all, thank you for your kind words. Thanks to everyone for joining us. I was looking at the time, it's 9:17 and everyone is there, so it's good. Hope you had a good evening. Great to be with you. I would say three words: talent, talent, talent. I mean, that's what is the big differentiator today. And I'll give you an example. As Minister of Industry, oftentimes people ask me for money. But when, for example, we got Moderna to come in Canada as one of their first investment outside the United States, the first thing that the CEO asked me is that, do you have talent to fuel our growth for the decades to come? Do you have an ecosystem that would be conducive to our research? Will you then be able to support us in our transition? So my sense is that what you're seeing, the three biggest transformation is the digitization of society, which is going to fuel, obviously, a number of jobs, the zero carbon society in which we're going, and if you're a Western economy like us, an aging population. And when I look back, I say, what are the biggest challenges of humanity that are going to drive growth and change and jobs? Well, we had the largest crisis, the health crisis, COVID-19. And if you look on the other big crisis of humanity is around climate change. And what was the breakthrough was science, technology, and innovation. And I think that is what's going to drive the future. And if you put on that, the technology of the future, if you think about artificial intelligence, quantum computing, cybersecurity, those are going to be are going to be impacting in a horizontal way all the sector of the economy that you're going to see. So if you ask me today, I would say science, technology, and innovation will be a big driver. Talent will be key in order to attract investment. And I would say everything we can do around education is going to make sure that we have the workforce for tomorrow, because that's the biggest challenge we have. Do we have enough talent for the growth of the future?
And just a quick follow-up, there's been a number of studies that are now coming out that are saying actually automation, we did 10 years worth of investment in automation during the pandemic, where there was actually like incentive to reduce the need for human capital. What are you doing to help the workers who are being left behind?
Reskilling. Upskilling. I mean, you're quite right. The interaction between machine and human is prevalent in every industry. Actually, it's interesting. If you go even in a small and medium-sized businesses, which would be tools, for example, or in aluminum or even in steel, you start seeing if you've seen some of these machines, you need a lot of skills today to operate that. I mean, this is not the job of your father or your mother at the time. You look at the type of equipment, robots are being key in order to increase productivity. And in society like us, where labor shortage, I know that's not one of the issues you have, but trust me, when you live on my side of the world, you try to optimize everything because we need to make sure that the interaction between machine and human will lead us to productivity. And at a time where, if you look in our country, unemployment rate is about 5%. The challenge for us is really to train the people to be able to maintain our edge in terms of technology, innovation, and productivity. So I think you're going to see more of that. And that's why the skills component of that, investing in reskilling, upskilling, is so key to maintain a workforce which will be able to operate these machines in the future.
Mm-hmm. Minister Damberg, you were telling me earlier that you're obviously in Sweden very invested in the green revolution. But I think traditionally we've thought about the green revolution as being new industries that are kind of off to the side and one hopes grows. But what's interesting is that you're seeing the green industry and the green revolution impact existing industries and really revolutionizing Sweden's most traditional industries.
Yeah, we see an increase of jobs in industry in Sweden right now, especially industries that are transforming, going green, going forward with innovation. And that's not the industries competing with low wages or costs, but with innovation and the green transition. And it's actually fascinating to look at the northern part of Sweden. We actually see 25,000 new jobs being created in traditional industry, steel, mining, energy sector, but also the car industries in Sweden are transforming, going electric and digitized. And this really transformed traditional industries and create a lot more new jobs in Sweden because we're tapped into the demands of the future. So those countries and those companies that don't understand the logic of these green transition will lose out. They will fall behind. So I think it's absolutely necessary to do this transition right now. And we see huge investments. So actually the unemployment rates in the northern part of Sweden are the lowest. This is not the traditional way. This is the Rust Belt of Sweden that actually 10 or 15 years got subsidies to actually move to Stockholm to get jobs. Now we have to think of how do we actually get people to move from Stockholm or Gothenburg to the northern part of Sweden where the new industrial jobs are being created. And this is a fascinating story about green jobs that actually increases in the industry today.
And could you just share, you said that the steel industry, I can't unthink this, has totally figured out how to produce steel, this hundreds-year-old manufacturing process in an entirely new way without CO?
1,000 years. You made steel in the same process for 1,000 years on this planet. We're now having a pilot plant that actually produces steels without carbon emissions. We take away the coal of the process, have green hydropower instead, and that creates only water as a rest product. That's totally, 7% of the emissions from Sweden comes from the steel industry. Transforming the steel industry can reduce our emissions in Sweden, but we could help other countries like India, other great steel producers to actually develop new techniques to produce steel. This is transforming industry. And actually Volvo made their first big truck that actually works in mining with steel without fossil pollution. And that's creating a new dilemma. Everyone talk about batteries, electric cars. We have big battery factories now being built in Sweden. That's great. But the batteries must be filled with green electricity, not coal or oil. Then it's no point. And the batteries should be in a green car, not in a brown car. So you have to make the steel without emissions as well. So this kind of whole value chain thinking transforms Swedish industries right now. And we see international cooperation now growing in all parts of society where Swedish company wants to find partners around the world. And I think that's create a new opportunity for traditional industries are also the green jobs of tomorrow.
Minister Moni, how is this playing out in Bangladesh, an emerging economy which has growth areas in tech and many others, but also really traditional industries and a lot of assembly that we rely on? How how are you thinking about education and what's going to be needed to kind of reskill and get your workforce ready for this transition?
Thank you. In today's world, I think change is the only constant, and getting the mindset right, adapting to that change, how fast you can adapt and embrace and prepare yourself for that change, that is the main key, I think. And while Minister Champagne was talking about not having enough workforce, we, on the other hand, in a very small country with a big population, and I think our population is one of our biggest strengths, and we need to transform this big population into big human resources, and that is precisely what, under the leadership of our Honorable Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina, we're trying to do, and that is being done in the education sector. And we want to give them the foundational skills, skills to adapt, skills, not just technological know-how, but also the skills to learn how to learn, because as they will go along, things will keep changing, and to adapt to those changes and transform their transition from one kind of job to another, transition from one set of skills to another, and constantly upskilling and reskilling themselves. That is what we're trying to do, and we're coming up with a new curriculum where all these things we're trying out. And there are two sides, the demand side, creating jobs, and the supply side, where we'll have to prepare the workforce of tomorrow, and also prepare them to transition to the new kinds of jobs. And for that supply side, we're not just coming up with the new curriculum, but also going into a blended education ecosystem, the whole thing. And that is where a more personalized learning, more asynchronous learning, all of these things will come together and create the workforce for tomorrow.
And when you talk about the new curriculum, are you focusing mostly on younger students, or are you focusing on also the blended, like work plus education and reskill?
Both.
Okay.
We're starting from preschool and thinking about already those who are in work and how to reskill and upskill them, because we have a big workforce, not just working in the country, but also elsewhere. So we're thinking about both and working on both sides.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yos, you have been doing some very interesting work on mental health, and your premise is that you are worried about having enough workers who are productive and happy and avoiding depression, which has become an increasing problem. Could you talk about how you think the workplace needs to change to get the most out of
Yes.
the people who work for organizations?
I think in all over the world, only 20% of the workers are engaged. And I think that's a very big problem, because that leads to less productivity, but also less health. So in my opinion, we need to create working conditions that people can adapt new ideas in a flexible way. They can learn all the time in their working place, and that the organizational structure leads to more effectiveness. So we started to work with self-organizing teams without a management structure. We started with 4 nurses in 2005, 6, and now we have 15,000 people working in self-organized teams. And we are working with 30 different partners in different countries all over the world, which face the same problems. And in my opinion, we need to increase the flexibility of the workers by letting them decide themselves on how they want to learn and how they can contribute to the workplace they're working in. If they feel ownership, they will be of more use of the company they're working in. So I believe that these 40, 50 years of top-down thinking created a lot of damage for a lot of people. So in Holland, we have 2 million people who have depression problems. So 2 million on 17 million. I think that's a big problem all over the world, that we create depressions by the working conditions. So if we improve the working conditions, a lot of people will be more happy, will be more productive, more flexible. So the learning, in my opinion, if you develop yourself in your working place, during your work, you will be more of use for the environment you're working in. So, and on a total, I think that we can increase productivity on a national level with 30%. So we now created a lot of bureaucracy. So and I was talking with the Minister of Denmark, and 30% in healthcare are workers who are not working in healthcare, but they are creating bureaucracy. So they are in all kinds of places, and that's not only in healthcare, it's also in education systems. So we created very complex systems that teachers, policemen, healthcare workers have to register, administer, be controlled. And if we change this, and if we use this time for productive services or making steel, whatever, doesn't matter. But this paradigm is so strong. All the MBAs and all over the world are teaching the same things. We have to cut the world into 6 pieces: strategic management, operational management, information management, and so on. And that's not the world we live in today. Young people want to have jobs who are attractive. They want to feel the meaning in their work. And if you do that, then we are growing. People are growing, and productivity will be growing. That's my opinion.
Mm-hmm. That's fascinating. So you think it's not the pandemic and isolation that's fueling depression, but the very nature of work, and that in a sense, the bureaucracy that you talk about is supporting a hierarchy that simply doesn't
contribute.
Yeah. Any reactions to that? Does that resonate? I mean,
well, I listened to you, and I was inspired by the word of our colleague from Sweden. I would say value-driven jobs. I mean, if you look at the young people, the same thing in Canada. We've been producing green steel, green aluminum. And I was in a class of young people, and imagine the green aluminum they're producing is now the aluminum that Apple is using in their phone. So people just don't want a job. They want something that will be meaningful in their lives. You talk about happiness. And I think that's what we need to realize. To be competitive, I think the green industrial transformation is the most attractive of things that you can offer to young people today. Everyone wants to have something which is meaningful to them, society, and the world. And I think this green industrial transformation, as you were mentioning, includes upskilling, reskilling. But I think the way you said it, we have the same thing. You know, people want to see, they want to produce green battery. They realize that the future is not only, like you said, an electric car, it's a green car. And everything that you can do, whether it's plastics, whether it's steel, whether it's aluminum. And I think we've been championing that as well, because with renewable energy, you can do things today. The whole electrification is providing, I think, to your point, when you go in these factories, I remember most employees I've seen in these factories, I was saying, they had a sense of mission. From the person at the reception, which I always say is the most important person who received you, to the person who was welding, to the salesperson that I met, everyone had a sense of mission. Everyone said, I'm changing the world. And that is the most powerful thing that you can provide, I would think, for happiness and for self-fulfillment. You help society, obviously you help the company you work with, and at the same time you go home and you're proud of what you do.
Yeah, when you share that kind of a mission, that's where quality also comes in. So in order to have quality in whatever you do, and coming from our world, I mean, green technology, green growth is so important to us because we are the least emitters, but we are one of the worst sufferers. So for us, it's really, really important, and it has to be done now, not in future. And when it is green growth, then everybody who's working, they work with that kind of a mission, and because now they want to feel inspired. And it's not just job, money, and just going on. They have to feel good as well, and feel that they're responsible citizens of this world, and they want to think about people and planet both. And so we have to create that kind of an ecosystem where they can learn and they can apply their learning, their knowledge, where they're doing good not just for themselves, but for the planet as well.
And that's fascinating because you said you're the sufferers. You're seeing the impact of climate change with floods, and
Yes.
so if you can make that link with your workers in terms of the transition, that will be.
Yeah, absolutely. And that is why it's not just when we are thinking about education, it's not just the, I talked about the supply side, but the demand side also, job creation. We need to, the employers and the educators need to work together. And it's not that the employers, the educators will be driven by the work world and the profit motivations only, because the employers themselves are also product of the education system. So we need to talk to them, and we need to interact and create jobs that will do good both to the people and planet. That the younger generation, they want to feel good, and that is where our future lies, and so that we don't destroy the planet.
One aspect of this is that we don't create a hierarchy of which jobs are good or not, because then climate jobs are better than taking care of my mother or my grandmother. That's a very strange thing. Or being a teacher, educating children or grown-ups is very important job. So I think it's very important that we don't lose our tracks here and follow the wrong argument. But actually, we've had a debate in Sweden now on your point on new public management, very modern way of controlling, organizing the public sector. That has really produced a negative debate in Sweden. What are the people that actually carry out and work in the public sector? What's their role in the workplace? So we've had a critical debate, not just evaluating measures, but actually looking how to involve people in the workforce to actually develop themselves and their organizations. I think that's a very relevant argument for a happy workplace. But also, sometimes we talk about technology being a threat. Especially in industry, automation, digitization, that might create an argument that my job is being threatened. And if you work in the car industry in Sweden, you've been making combustion engines, the traditional engine of a car, and now we will not make them anymore. We will make electric cars. So what we do with the workforce that have put in 10, 20, 30 years of their life into Volvo cars, for instance, working there. So of course we have to have a scheme that actually upskills and retrain them in the workforce, not only looking at the young people going into the sector. So that's where our labor partners in Swedish, we have a Swedish model where we make central bargaining and they agree on things, and now they're agreed on a scheme to a mid-career shift system that we actually finance from the government side, but still it's a good bargain system that actually makes it possible for people in mid-career take off a year and study with 80% of your income. So you actually can transform the automotive workers to the electric cars, or if you work in elderly care, to be more specialized in some cases, or the engineer that have a good education to start with, but now has to learn AI. That is the shift on the whole labor market, and you have to make the system work also financially for people to make the education. Otherwise, it will not work for ordinary people.
Before I open it up to your questions, and we'll do it old-fashioned style, by the way, since we're here in person with microphones. I'm excited to talk about a report that the World Economic Forum is releasing tomorrow that is a perfect segue to this conversation. And it talks about a new modeling. It's part of a series that WEF is doing about the future of work. And new modeling of the U.S. economy suggests that investing $1.3 trillion in social jobs of tomorrow could unlock $3.1 trillion in GDP returns and create 11 million jobs by 2030. And the jobs, this is focusing on social jobs a little bit more than manufacturing, which we've been discussing. But it would include 4.2 million teaching jobs, 1.8 million jobs for personal care and service workers, and almost 1 million jobs in healthcare. And so I think a lot of the conversation here has focused a bit on manufacturing and the transition of traditional industry to green industry. What is the value of social jobs, and will that Do you agree that there will be a demand for many more of them, and that there needs to be as much of an investment in these sorts of jobs as there is in retooling the Volvo plant?
Look at the demographics. Mm-hmm. In 20, 30 years, we will have double 70-plus people in many countries. So if we don't change, we won't have the people to serve them. So if we don't change the ways of working, we won't have the capacity to. So it's either the choice: we change, or we lower the accessibility, or we lower the quality. Mm-hmm. So we need, in my opinion, if you look at demographics, I'm talking with a lot of people in different countries, and it's all the same. The scarcity of healthcare workers is already there. The frustration about the systems is already there. We need to change the systems in order to increase the flexibility of the capacity, and we need to create more attractive workplaces by giving more autonomy, freedom, and more ownership to the healthcare workers.
I was just saying, I call them the heroes of our society. Just look 2 years ago when we had the worst health crisis in the last century. Look at society, you know, those that we should really praise, the teachers, the nurses, the people who were making society work. We saw it in every country. Mm-hmm. And people which we have talked, and you're right, we talk about transformation and plants and all that, but let's look at what is the fabric of society today. What are we without teachers? What are we without nurses? What are we without support people who have made sure that society works? So I think your point is crucial, and I think there's a renewed appreciation for these jobs that are underpin the way we work today. If you don't have childcare, just look at people who were trying to do their work now during COVID and working from home. People realize the value of childcare. And that's why we've invested in our country to make sure that if you want to bring more women in the workforce, if you want to bring more inclusion in the workforce, healthcare, childcare, making sure people can contribute is key. And to likewise, our Swedish friend, we created what we call the skills passport. So in a sense, many times we were looking at skills with the lens of the company. We said, let's empower the people. So they will have a skill passport, so that exactly like you, they can take time off to get the skills they need. But I think for me, the biggest takeaway of the last 2 years when you talk about labor is really those who make our society work. And how can we champion them? How can we empower them? How can we celebrate them? Because without them, nothing works in our modern societies.
But are we willing to reward them?
Pay them. These are low-paying.
Are we willing to increase their salaries? Because what we saw throughout the years that the salaries are under pressure.
Totally.
And what we did was raising the salaries. And by raising the salaries, the results increased.
Yeah.
So we have wrong assumptions about efficiency and about effectiveness. So by reducing the focus on efficiency, the effectiveness grew. And also the results grew. So we have the highest paid workers now in the country. Wow. But we have a lot of comments from colleagues who said, if you are raising the salaries, then we are under pressure. And I said, no, you can do the same. You only have to change the structure of your organization. Less people in overhead roles and more focusing on the primary process.
It's obvious that these jobs will increase if we should handle the aging population and so forth. But it's also a gender equality issue. You touched upon it. Because we've seen when the elderly care don't work, or where the child care don't work in a society, women stay at home. They don't work. And then you have another problem on the labor market, and their freedom, because they don't earn their own money. They don't get their own pension. So it transforms into the system. So if you look at this question also with gender glasses, it is obvious that these kind of investments is very important also for gender equality. It's not only about workforce, but if you have problems with recruiting, if you have skills problem, then you cannot take away half of the equation. Women not being part of the labor market. So it's also very efficient to do these kind of investments so that women participate in the labor market. So it's a double win, I think.
No, women's participation in the workforce, and everybody knows now that's the smartest choice. We have to do it. And
Well said.
We have a
There's a lot of smile in the room.
Absolutely, absolutely. Now everybody understands it.
Yes.
So that's
It took a long time, eh?
half the war is won already. So it's we have to look at the issues of equality, equity, gender balance, everything, and then look at the quality, how we want to approach all these things. And I totally agree that we need to focus. And when we focus on all these jobs, if I'm talking about the teachers, their financial as well as social security, we have to ensure that their standing in the society, how much respect we're giving them, and that must commensurate with the pay also.
Do you get a sense that in Bangladesh that there is a renewed commitment to pay them more?
Definitely to enhance the quality of their lives, yes. And if that means paying them more, we are definitely thinking about it within our very sort of constraints that we work.
Nationalize the primary school.
Yeah, all our schools, we have all our primary education is nationalized. And now there is also demand for secondary education as well, but we're thinking how we can make it better.
Very interesting. I'd love to open it up to your questions, and please raise your hand. And we're going to go from side to side, and we do disinfect microphones, by the way, so we'll start with you.
Hi, thank you, everyone. So I run a company called Skyhive Technologies, and we have access to real-time labor market data at a very quantum level. And so I just want to double-click on a couple of these topics. In Canada, we have a healthcare shortage of 249,506 people right now.
I'd like to have you on my team, by the way.
And in terms of green, I spoke at COP26. Right now, our labor shortage globally is 3.2 years and growing. And so we're only going to be constrained by our ability to mobilize the entire labor economy. And I see the labor economy as obviously employers, government, training institutions, and people. And that wheel needs to move as efficiently as possible. So my question to you is, are you seeing models where you're double-clicking on the elements of impact that you've been talking about, where we don't need to be concerned about a future of not having enough teachers or not having enough childcare, because we are getting out in front of looking at labor economies, not just through the lens of employment rates, but through the lens of quality and through the lens of sustainability and planning for the future for these roles in relation to our populations. Thank you.
So I think the question is, like, how do we grapple, essentially, and that's all very well said, with just the acute labor shortages, like making all these changes along the way of just needing the talent.
Yeah, my opinion is that throughout the last 50 years, we disintegrated so much that it became less and less effective. If you look at the labor force as a whole, so if I only look in healthcare or in education systems, all the different tasks are cut into pieces. We are focusing on processes and in tasks instead of results. So if we focus on outcome and if we integrate different roles, the jobs will become more attractive, more effective, and we need less people for more activities. So that's my analysis throughout the years. I should have become an economist, and I became a nurse. No, I studied economy, but
You can still retrain.
I became a nurse.
Well, we have upskilling.
Yes, yes.
We can give you the passport of skills passport.
Oh, thank you.
And if you need more workforce, please tell us.
We got it all
We
solved.
have a complete solution package around here.
I'm so sorry we interrupted you.
No, but do you agree with the analysis that we can, with the same population, we can much more if we structure it in a different way?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's about double-clicking now on what are the elements of impact that go beyond just income levels and employment levels. We should write a white paper together on this.
Okay, we do that.
Okay, I'd like to take another question on the right, please.
It's a very appealing frame that you present us with, the self-organizing teams. It makes a good sense. Do you have some sources for us, maybe after this session, for how that works? I tried to do it with my teams, and it ended up, maybe I did it all wrong, but it ended up by them begging me for more structure and more processes. And
Then some
they
things
were
went
really
wrong.
not happy with it.
Yeah.
And I would love them to do it, but
Yeah.
it doesn't.
No, it's very important that you realize that it's really a different paradigm. And that's what a lot of people think, that if we change the structure, it will work. But that's not happening. It's a culture, it's behavior, and it's a lot of elements together. I'm writing a book now where I describe in 14 chapters the different elements which you need to look at it differently, and then it will work. So there are very...
You have a buyer here.
There are very successful transitions of organizations at the moment. And Frederic Laloux wrote a book, Reinventing Organizations, and he, on a higher level, shows that the way we think about organizations will change in time. It's changing already because a lot of young people are feel very familiar with these ways of working. But
It's really interesting for me because I read quite some articles saying this model doesn't work. I'm sure you're familiar with that. How do you counter these critiques?
I don't put any energy in it. I just show how it works. We build one after another company, so based on the same principles. And you know, I put a lot of efforts and a lot of energy in people who see it and who understand it. So people who don't see it won't be successful on changing. So if you change the paradigm, if you put trust and humanity in the center, because that's where it starts. Not starting, we will make more profit if we do this and that. No, if you are concerned about how people are learning in their daily work, how they're working, how their health is in the focus, then you will change. And really the principles are very simple. But we made the world so complex that it's very difficult to think simple. That's our biggest problem.
Thank you. Looking forward to your book.
Well, thank you.
Question over here in the front and then to the side.
Thank you, everyone, for such excellent insights this morning. My name is Dipankar Trehan. I'm a global shaper from India. A lot of key interventions were discussed this morning, right from curriculum interventions to skills passport and to transforming traditional industries. To my mind, all of these interventions apply to people who are in some or the other format of formal employment, formal education, or formal training. But there are a lot of people who are left behind. Just to give out context, about 175 million people in India alone, 15 to 29 years old, are not in training, they're not in education, they're not in employment. How do we extend these interventions to them and ensure that we reach the last mile? Thank you.
Excellent question.
Well, we are not talking about just formal education, but there has to be this non-formal education as well. And in the skills training also, not just those who are in work, but also those who are out of work. And there are models in many parts of the world. I was just looking at, I was at the Education World Forum yesterday in London, and there's a for out-of-school children or young people. There's a program in Philippines that has shown a huge success. So many countries are doing it, and in Bangladesh also we're trying it. And I think we have to think innovatively and bring them on board. And it doesn't have to be classrooms. This pandemic has shown us that we need not be confined in classrooms. Totally. We can be outside these spaces confined by walls. And we can be anywhere, be working or out of work, be in school or outside, and still be learning. And that is where the blended learning, the whole framework of ours is coming in. So I think every one of us, as he said, we have to think about people, the planet, happiness, health, and then work our ways through it.
How is this playing out in Canada?
Well, I was just saying technology is a great enabler. Technology allows you today, and my friend said it, you know, maybe some of us, because of our age, we still think of education going to a place. Now education can come to you on your phone, in front of your tablet, in front of your computer. What is marvelous in the world today, you can educate billions of people on a digital platform. And I think it's true in a place like India where you have a lot of people. It's also true in places like us where we have a huge landmass and few people. You know, there's no way you can bring people from necessarily all parts of Canada, trust me, to a university, a college, a technical institute. I think that we should use more. That's why I say science, technology, and innovation. The smart people like you are asking questions. I've seen some apps today where, you know, what is learning today and what do you need to learn in the world of tomorrow is quite different perhaps than when I went to school. And I think the skill of the future today, we have democratized, in my view, way more education and skills and training and upskilling. I went in a factory, I'll tell you, for example, not to name the company, but it's in the aviation sector where they produce jet engine, very complex things. But in order to keep the know-how, everyone had a tablet. So they have an internal Facebook. So if you're a worker in India and you have a question about that piece, you have like a Facebook internally, you send a picture and there's a video of someone who may be in Texas or in Montreal, and they will guide you. So there's so many ways to learn today, and I think technology is a great enabler for that.
Absolutely. But I think it's a great question because in a society like Sweden, if you don't accomplish schools, you have problems on the labor market. And it's not only about formal criteria, it's in your head. You are being abused by the school system, so you fall out. So they're not the ones that will take up their tablets, and although they have a tablet, they will not learn for themselves because they've changed in a different path. So I think you have to see the people in this as well, because they're not easily found. So we try to have a regulation that the municipality levels should meet and know every young people that don't attend school. So no one is left behind, and try to find ways of getting them engaged in some kind of process, perhaps not the formal educational system. We have informal education that is very much not technology-driven, but people-to-people driven by organizations. So you'll have to. Some of them just can stay at home and do their skills by computers, but not all. So I think it's a relevant question that it is a risk of our society building so many hinders to get on the labor market that actually produces fails that not necessarily has to happen.
I think we have time for one last question here.
Yeah, hi, such a lovely discussion. I'm Shanti. I'm a Schwab social innovator working on disability livelihoods. In the 16th century, Minister Damberg, Minister Moni, and me, we would have been considered visually impaired. But today, it's a $147 billion industry, the eyewear industry, and it's a value-driven job, right, for the people there. So I wonder whether governments are looking at what I'm calling the purple economy, where there are more assistive solutions and services. So it doesn't even look like a social job. But, Sam Hall does work on disability, and I worked with them. But I don't think we're looking at it as an economy. We're not looking at it as jobs. Just wanted to hear your reactions, and, we can always take this offline, but just wanted to seed that thought in your head. The largest minority in the world are 1 billion people who are disabled, and their families, which is maybe 2 billion altogether, and it's a $13 trillion economy. That's all. Just want to put it out there. If there's any reactions, I'd love to hear it.
It is important what he has been talking about. So it's when we talk about people and their quality of lives, it is important. And we have to, if we want to be inclusive, and we have to be, if we want to grow, we have to be inclusive. And that would mean including all of them, wherever they are. Oh, absolutely. Eyes.
Or those who had operations, Otherwise, I would be like you. I just had the operation, trust me.
Minister, you.
But it's an interesting question because we struggle with the question. It's not easy. Yeah. We have a state-owned company, Samhall, that actually works with people with disabilities in some form and creates jobs that they actually can do. So they get a real job, they get their income, but it's a part of the labor market that doesn't work exactly in the same way as the rest of the labor market. So, and try to have them there to also get them to take the step to the normal labor market, but not. So, but it's working for some. It's not perfect for everyone. So it's a hard question to answer.
And services to them.
Yeah.
And that's where the jobs are for all citizens. That's what
I'd like you to join me in thanking our panelists for a simply fascinating session.